Would you mind doing like a quick intro? Like, I don't know, like a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I currently live in Taiwan. I've been nomadic for the past few years. I worked in the corporate world, strategy consulting for almost 10 years, left in 2017 to carve my own path. Over the past 5 years, I've kind of discovered writing, having this broader conversation about what are we really trying to achieve with the work and what's happening, and creativity, sharing online, all these things. And yeah, this is kind of what I love to do, just have these conversations, hear from other people about what's bringing them alive. And what I'm most interested in is shifting the conversation from getting ahead to coming alive.
Love it. Cool, cool. I guess you were kind of on a pretty stereotypical path. Like, you went to like college, you were got an MBA, right? And then you were doing that whole thing.
For stereotypical for like a very elite kind of person, I didn't grow up with that background actually. So it was very weird for me. I grew up like solidly middle class in the US, and working for strategy consulting firms was not only something I didn't know about, it was something people told me I couldn't. When I found out about it, people told me, "Oh, you didn't go to the right school, you don't have the right background. This probably isn't a path for you. Like maybe if you go to grad school at like a Harvard or something in a few years, it's something you could think about, but we're probably not going to look at you." Um, so of course I just kept trying over and over again to break into these firms and ended up breaking in. And I think I discovered almost the most extreme version of careerism, which is just like the obsession with a narrative around this like path through life that's always focused on the future. And I bought into it for a while, but I was never like raised like that. So I was always like not that good at playing that game, and eventually just had to leave. Didn't really find much excitement on that path.
When did you realize like this wasn't for me?
I think it's a slow realization. I changed jobs several times. What I thought I was doing was playing this very strategic game where I was going to get all these different work experiences and be more hireable in the future. What I was really doing is desperately searching for like that beginner's period where you're learning a lot and you're absorbing information, getting exposed to new ideas. That's what I love, and it's what I've been able to create on a much uh, more stable way in self-employment. But yeah, at the time it was I would get impatient after a year and a half, start looking for new jobs, change jobs, and it would just kind of go on forever.
Yeah, I guess you kind of talk about like the idea how people think work is suffering. I just during that time, did you feel like you were suffering? Like was it really tough or were you just kind of just there?
I graduated in '07, and that was coincidentally the first year Google made the top companies to work for list. That opened up this broader conversation of like, should work be fun? Should we treat people better? Which seems a little silly now, but it was a pretty big shift. Like, what stories did you grow up with around work? Like, around your house, like, what did people say about working and jobs and careers? Yeah, are there any phrases that stick out?
It's kind of it's interesting because like I feel like my parents are quite the opposite. Like my mom's a lawyer and she's run like she's got a successful business, and then my dad's also almost like kind of semi-retired. Like he doesn't really have a job. He just kind of chills.
Not what they did, like what were the ideas you grew up with? Like what was your mindset that you absorbed from your surroundings that you're supposed to think about work?
Um, I guess it's just like just making money, I guess, to like live because they were both like immigrants, so just trying to make enough, I guess.
Yeah, so it's this idea you gotta work, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's
Right. And this is the idea I graduated into too, which is like work is a fact of life. And what people mean by work is a full time job with a salary. So you have to do these job things. That's a fact of life. We don't question that. And it might kind of suck. You might be able to find some joy in it, but it's like more or less something you have to do. You put up with. That's the cost of being a human. Um, so that was the kind of idea. I don't think I started thinking about like finding meaning in my work until later in my career, like late after 2010, when those ideas really started bubbling up. And I noticed it profoundly in the like new grads joining the companies I was at. They like wanted these amazing Google type workplaces. They wanted to be happy all the time, and it was very different than like what I graduated into.
No, I think I had a similar like mindset to you where I have always thought of work as just like thing that you have to do to make money. It's not like it's not meant to be enjoyable.
A necessary evil.
Yeah.
It's like it's something you have to do. It might kind of suck, but it's part of life. I think the dangerous shift that happened was it shifted to something where people were like, this is the most important thing in our life and it has to be meaningful. I think
Yeah.
that's really high stakes because I don't think it can deliver, especially in job or career form. I tell people that like the problem isn't work, right? I think we need to expand work and consider all things we want to engage in, right? We might want to raise kids, we might want to volunteer in our community, we might want to write, might want to have a garden, right? All these things could be considered work or contributing to the world or engaging with the world. Where we go off the rails is when we start talking about the abstractions of work, which are really a job and a career. And they have nothing to do with what people actually want to do. Then we start layering stories, a story on top of jobs and careers, meaningful work. We're so far removed from what we're actually talking about that people start aiming at a story rather than literally looking around and saying, like, what do I like actually doing?
Yeah. I guess because most people kind of just go through life kind of like almost not questioning too much. So they just like do it.
Well, our scripts were very powerful, right? And especially with work, they were they actually worked quite well, right? So these narratives around work were birthed after World War II, and organizations started growing and offering these paths. The growth was incredible, 4 to 5% a year. People have called it the Great Boom in many countries across the world. Certain countries led that wave, and then there was a second wave of like catch-up growth in other countries entering the industrialization period. So we've mistaken the whole point of life as going to work for a big company for 40 years and then doing that because there's some sort of payoff. I think what happened is that that journey was actually much more enjoyable 50, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Because people stayed at companies longer, companies didn't fire people. You didn't need to think about a career. You just kind of stayed at one company. You typically lived in one community. Less women worked, so there was actually this whole world of work, engaged in the work of a community and families. And now we're all workers. We think about first our workplace instead of our community or place where we're living. Companies don't give a shit about us. They'll fire you if they're restructuring. And that payoff has kind of been shattered, but we're still clinging to the story. We want it to be true because we don't know what else to do if there is no perfect story.
Yeah. I guess for you then, like when you quit your job, like what did you do?
For me, it was hard. I didn't have a lot of things figured out. I had this hunch that I had ran out of moves. So two things happened. One, I got a job offer offering me $50,000 less than what I was doing, and they were selling me on this meaningful work idea. Oh, this is exactly what you claim to care about. You'll love what you do. In 5 years, we could probably match what you're currently making. And I kind of said to myself, if I really cared about this work, I could just go create it on my own. Or I should at least go give it a shot. And if I'm gonna take a pay cut, I might as well work less. I had also, like, counting internships and full-time jobs, I had 9 jobs in 14 years. And I kind of just felt like, okay, what are you doing? This hasn't worked out so far. Maybe you need to go try self-employment. So I left, and I didn't really have a vision of like what it would turn into now. My conception of it now is so different than it was 5 years ago. It was pretty much like go from full-time consultant to freelance consultant with more flexibility and ownership over my time. Did that for 6 months, and then I realized I was kind of on a deeper journey.
I know you did some traveling along the way, right? Like you went to Asia.
Yeah, so I did a trip right after I quit my job to Europe for 4 or 5 weeks, and that was a weird trip. I was like disoriented, I was scared about the future. I didn't really know what was ahead of me. I was kind of like stuck in time. I probably shouldn't have traveled right after. But I think it was good that I kind of took some time just to like decompress from my job. Um, I took another trip about a year later to Asia for 5 weeks. And before that trip, I landed a freelance project where I said, where I basically was like, all right, I can't do this. I'm going to travel. But I said, if you want me to work on it 10 hours a week from Asia, I'm happy to do that. And they were like, sure. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I was getting paid money to do stuff I actually liked, from the beach in Bali, or from a hotel in Kuala Lumpur, or from an Airbnb in Taipei. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And I decided then, as I was coming back to the US, that I was going to come and do like a longer experiment, 3 months. So I came to Taipei actually about 3 years ago, and was going to do a month here, then Vietnam, and then go some other places. Basically, I ended up meeting my now wife in the first month. So I more or less stayed in Taiwan, but we have eventually traveled to a number of different places together.
Ooh, so how many years is that? Like 3-ish years in Taiwan?
So I arrived in Taiwan in beginning of September 2018. So it's been 3 years. In Taipei now. We've been traveling around Taiwan for the last 9 months.
Yeah. And what's your experience been like there? I'm sure it's quite different from the US, right?
The first thing I realized was that I had these scripts running in my head about what I should do and how I should be. And being in a place like Taipei where I can't read the language, well, I couldn't at the time, I couldn't understand what most people were saying to me. And I realized I didn't know what the default scripts were in Taiwan. So when I was in Boston, my first year of self-employment, I knew exactly what people think of me. I'd take a bike ride in the middle of the day and I think, oh, I'm a loser. Like, what am I doing? What am I not working? I'm in my 30s. I'm wasting myself. But in Taiwan, I kind of just had like this calmness of, I don't know what people think. They probably just say like, oh, somebody here traveling or a foreigner. Um, and yeah, it was kind of this deep breath for my soul that I was able to just relax into and look at things with a little lightness, kind of assess like, oh, I have this American mind up here. But there are all sorts of different scripts and different ways of seeing the world. And it really opened me up, I think.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of cliche, but I do feel like traveling does make you inherently more open-minded.
Some travel, I think.
Yeah.
I think a 1 week vacation doesn't actually do it.
Yeah.
Vacation mode is a completely different mode of life. Vacation is basically a break from life. And it's with the mindset of maximizing pleasure and experience. I think everyone needs to go live somewhere outside of their comfort zone for a month and live like a local. Like, live somewhere with your own kitchen, go do grocery shopping, cook, walk around, try to like form relationship with people in your neighborhood, and just like feel what that's like. I think that's been the coolest thing about traveling, because I've stayed more than a month in Thailand, Indonesia, Mexico, Spain, and Taiwan. And in each of those places, everything's a different energy. Like, even different cities in Taiwan's a different energy. And it really kind of breaks you out of your default modes and default scripts.
Yeah, for sure. I feel quite lucky because I was able to do that like at a very young age when I was 17. I lived in Italy for 10 months, like through an exchange program, and that was super interesting. Just to
Yeah,
like
what were the ahas for you?
uh I think just like being in a different place and seeing how people live so differently, because I think I had always thought like there was one way of doing things, like you have to eat dinner at this time, um and yeah, it's just so many things are different, but like almost better in a way.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's the cool thing about Europe is you can go quickly to many different cultures and realize, okay, 10 minutes in this direction, it's completely different.
What are you up to these days? Because I saw like your recent tweet. It was like you got a job at like a VC.
No, 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 that was a joke.
Is that a joke? Okay. What's that all about?
So I mean, a lot of people were saying they're getting hired at this place. I'm
Okay.
basically just joking. At the root of the joke is I think we're at this great shift where many people are discovering these scripts don't work anymore, and they're embarking on new paths. And I think a lot of people don't know what they're getting into. For me, I found this shift disorienting, stressful, hard, confusing. Um, but it's mostly what I've been writing about for the past 4 to 5 years. And that's been to help myself understand what is going on. This is so confusing. If you read in the news, you'd think there's a giant debate around being all in the office or all remote work. It's fake. It's not real. Anyone working at a good company has had hybrid work for years, right? Or at least a company that actually wants to compete for talent and run a 21st century company. There's no such thing as all in the office every day. And if there is, there's typically an outsized financial reward for doing so. um, but all that is to say, there isn't really a deep conversation about what's happening with this shift to work. Um, there's storylines that news organizations pick that are polarizing, but they don't really get to the root of like what's really happening.
Okay. I just have a final question. If someone's like in a position, maybe they're in a job and then like they're not really happy, but they kind of feel stuck, like what would you say to that person?
Is this you?
No, no, because I'm in my last year of like college, like university. So my thing
Are
is
you
like
are you afraid of that though?
not really. I think because I'm kind of privileged in a way, and I feel like if I hate a job, then I can quit. I don't feel like
Can you though? Like I think this is something important to double down on. I think privilege aside, I think what happens to many people is they start identifying as the worker or the career path or the
yeah,
kind of person that makes a certain amount of money. And quitting that identity is way harder than quitting a job. Um, so I think this is my advice to somebody that feels stuck is you, another job will take the pain away. I've seen this over and over and over again. I used to do full like career coaching, and the number one thing that would happen is somebody comes to me, I'm pain, I hate this job, I'm miserable, I need to make a change. You help them find another job, and their curiosity for life ends. They stop the bleeding, and they're fine until a year and a half later. They're gonna call you again because they haven't actually solved the root cause problem. What I would say is interrogate what you're really feeling, um, and try to figure out what you really want. I aim at I invert the problem. So there's this famous mental model like invert, always invert. The goal of this is not to aim at, so I want a great job, I want a dream job. I think that's really hard. I think easier is how might I ruin myself? Right? So then you paint an image of like what's your worst case scenario? You're stuck in a job. What steps would I take to become stuck? And start unpacking those. Okay, I might stop reading. I might stop talking to people outside of my bubble. And then do the opposite of those actions. So that's the advice I would give.
yeah, that kind of makes sense. Oh, yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much for taking the time.
It's good talking with you, and keep the curiosity alive.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, so where can people find you if they want to like check out your work?
Twitter, P_MILLERD is the easiest way to engage with me, or boundless.substack.com. I write a weekly newsletter on work and what's happening in the world in regards to that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll make sure to link it in the description.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Have a great day.